You have to forgive me because I have some of the responses from the group, and so I'd have to read that. But I think the main issue that we're addressing here today is why is the question of attracting and nurturing quality researchers important for think tanks. And I think it is important because the success of a think tank depends on its ability to respond to timely issues of priority to a country. And in doing so, a think tank must have quality researchers in-house to do this. And so we move on to the question of who is a quality researcher. And a review of the responses provided by the OCB group indicates that all the respondents, the 5 organizations who took part in this process, recognize the importance of qualifications in determining a quality researcher. And the group felt that a quality researcher is not necessarily an academic, such as a university professor. However, the group was of the view that qualifications were important and agreed that PhDs were essential because advanced qualifications are viewed as adding credibility to an organization in terms of the skills that come with achieving advanced level training in such areas such as conducting rigorous research and technical analysis. The group agreed that the candidate or a quality researcher had to have a track record of publications. However, they felt that that alone was not enough, and having a PhD and a track record of publications was not enough, and that a quality researcher had to have other skills. That researcher had to have excellent writing skills, as well as excellent communication skills, because they needed to communicate with a wide range of stakeholders and convince stakeholders of the outputs or the recommendations flowing from the research. The group also felt that a quality researcher had to have interpersonal skills to enable that researcher collaborate with a wide range of stakeholders. And they needed to be good managers and to be able to mentor, young staff under them. They felt that having those skills would also help to build capacity within the organization, in the sense that mentoring would grow younger people, and the good managerial skills would also help a researcher manage projects and programs. And they felt that a quality researcher must also have the ability to identify relevant pressing issues and respond to them in a timely manner, and also have the tenacity to drive policy reforms and to drive the recommendations of their research. And I think that we agree that there was some discussion as to whether to have a pool of researchers in-house or a pool of skills in-house to be able to do this. But I think the idea that came up was that in view of the limited funds, it was difficult to have a pool of people to do this, and these qualities could be found in one person. That was a quality researcher. But these are issues we'll discuss further. It was also agreed that the concept of who a quality researcher is may differ from one organization to another. But for policy centers or think tanks, these qualities need not change, because after all, think tanks exist to influence policy, to conduct research, undertake advocacy, so as to inform national policy. And therefore, it was important to have researchers with a diverse range of skills. And so I think that this brings us to, the discussion. And I would like to open the discussion by, of course, we've identified who a quality researcher is, but I'm sure that others may have other views, and we may need some help from Katie to document some of this. But I think the first question is, what qualities should a person have to be classified as a quality researcher? What skills and qualities are important? And in addition to what we have, the interpersonal skills, good communication skills, excellent writing skills, someone who is driven and wants to bring about reform. I don't know whether we have, or any of us has, any ideas of some of the qualities and skills that a quality researcher should come with. Do you have any ideas of what skills and qualities such a person should come with?
Thank you. Since we are talking about just not researchers, but researchers working in a think tank, I think it is very important that good quality researcher should be able to connect the research output with policies. I think this is very important. Sometimes, we do research and then we come in at some conclusions, but what is the policy relevance of that and how the policymakers can benefit from it? I think that distinguishes a good researcher from a good researcher in a think tank.
I think I think researchers at think tanks must have passion about a topic, an area. Otherwise, they are just, employees in which you tell me, hey, run this regression, estimate the parameter. Because without the passion, this person will not have the ability to pose relevant questions, relevant research questions, because we are talking about researchers, we are not talking about communicators. And you have to be able to pose relevant, interesting, policy-oriented questions. And you will not do that unless you are passionate about the topic.
I wanted to suggest that one of the qualities of a quality researcher should be the ability to be able to think in multidisciplinary contexts, because we are not just economic beings. You have identities and you have genders. So even though you might be economist, you should be able to, not in a specialized manner, but in a general manner, engage with multidisciplinary contexts. And if you're a sociologist, then you should be able to think about what economic interests mean. So multidisciplinarity, irrespective of your subject, I think should be an important attribute.
Thank you very much. Mine is very closely related to the last one. I think a good researcher should not be really dogmatic or believe that other stakeholders don't know anything. Yesterday it was emphasized it's good to listen to views from other people, and then you can be able to put it through the proper analysis to be able to reject or accept some of the views that come across.
I think good researcher is also one, who is a good person in himself or herself. That's it. Moral setting. Yeah.
Sorry, I can understand what.
I'm saying that in addition to the qualities and skills, what personal characteristics do you think that a quality researcher should have? You don't have to answer that. You can just focus on the qualities and skills.
Yeah, I think one of the quality and skills that the researcher needs to have is to be a good mentor and to be a good leadership of a team. He has to transmit not just the knowledge, he has to transmit a passion for a topic or a passion for research. I think it's very important to have this type of senior researchers just to transmit the idea of the center and transmit the institutional aim of our institutions.
About the personal characteristics, I think it should be a person who is open and generous with her ideas, because otherwise the person will not share, There will not be like a learning process among the people. They're willing to give up some of their time to nurture, to talk, to brainstorm about somebody else's questions and issues.
Thank you. A good researcher should have analytical capabilities.
A researcher should be a person who is capable of managing human elements, human resources, because it involves data collection and analysis. It involves a number of enumerators. And unless he manages this human, then there will be a problem in the data base and on the quality of the data.
Okay. I was saying that for younger TTIs like us, a good researcher, a quality researcher should be able to multitask, because that's a skill that needs to be developed. Okay, it's very important. It's
I just wanted to highlight one interpersonal skill, which will be the ability to communicate effectively in terms of initiating policy and dealing with policymakers as well.
Thank you. Just a quick one. I think a good think tank researcher should be able to fundraise as well, writing good proposals and fundraising for the projects.
I think I would rather like to reframe the question to become how to do and nurture quality research. Because good, well-qualified researchers may not give you quality research. So I think we have to broaden the question. In that context, a good researcher of the kind of quality that we're talking about should be a team leader or a team player. Must be ready to work in teams. And when you work in teams, you must be tolerant and open-minded, as one of us has said. That also means that in these days of multidisciplinarity, somebody mentioned it, that open-mindedness is very important. That is also why you don't just need to talk about good quality researchers, but good research. Because good research that comes out from multidisciplinary research will require interplay between those that are good and those that are being mentored and those that are not so good. So I think that is my contribution.
Yeah, qualifications are important, but I think research experience is also, equally important. Some people, during our recruitment process, we find that some people who do not have a PhD degree have had 4 or 5 years of solid research experience, and sometimes they're better than the other candidates with PhD degrees. And in terms of some of the, characteristics about a person's approach to work, I would say attention to detail is very important. So, those who have better attention to detail always turn out to be much better researchers. And in fact, in any kind of program activity, they're better.
Sorry, I'll just
just make a quick point. I want to also add that I think one of the things about a quality researcher should also be the ability to rethink norms and what is good quality and what is success. I think that, to me, is really significant aspect of what is a good analytical mind. The ability to think these norms themselves in different contexts, quality and success and impact mean different things, certainly in our context, in unstructured and fluid context, as was being discussed in the morning. So I think just the ability to rethink given norms is, for me, a mark of someone who has a good analytical mind.
I suppose just to add to the debate, I think so far we've focused on what are the skills and qualities, but I suppose I'm thinking more, what about the experience, and thinking about Nancy's comments. Do we want someone with experience in government, or, as Antonia mentioned, someone writing proposals? Do we want someone from the NGO, sort of CSO community or development community, which has also possibly done research, or someone coming from a university? So also thinking about balancing experience, skills with the qualities.
Yeah, I think the issue of training, my view is that good academic training is necessary but not sufficient. Because you see, every profession has a way of doing things. And good research will be judged on how well you've operated within the laid down way of doing research as per your profession. So if we think masters is good enough to give us that minimum, then so be it. But I think we should not really compromise on the minimum technical training, because that's what really established is the foundation.
I think, for being a policy researcher, academic researcher is must. It's the first stage, I think, because to become a policy researcher, I think academic research is the first step. So wherever, in whichever pedestal you put, being a researcher, then you are turning into the policy researcher. So you need a research. Research is a first, and that is, I think, first stage for research, being a researcher. Then to the converting to the policy research. That's the outcome. And I think, to become a researcher, as it is being said, there are institutional factors also, where through which the kind of environment. So I think environment has to be taken here, that what is the environment around. And if the environment is that, within the institute that, you have to produce a good quality of research, which is to be published, in the established journals, and that gives you the scope for promotion in your career progression. That is one thing. But a person who is doing a research, he's having all the attributes, doing research, and his research is not recognized, but his research is being used for the policy making. So, but he has never published that kind of publications or sort of thing. So how you treat that phenomena, I think, because, he's policy influencing. But if you go to outside the university, if he goes to the university system, he will be treated as with no publication, nothing. So how that is the kind of thing, I think. You have to have research first, but at the same time, the other thing is policy.
I think that dichotomy between an academic and a policy researcher is something that will not lead us very far, because I think it is impossible to influence policy without strong evidence, and the only way to get strong evidence is to produce it in a way that is rigorous. And for that, you need your academic skills to be in the top 1%. So it's like, I don't know. might be, the question should be how to communicate rigorous research findings instead of being an academic or a policy researcher, and that the problem will be how to communicate and not the kind of researcher.
I agree with Roxana about that you need first academic research before to make policy research. But maybe the difference is that when you make policy research, you pursue an objective, and is to make a change in the political public policies. So maybe that could be the difference, because we want to make a change. You want to make influence in the policies. To the public policies. Yes. Or maybe you make academic research because you want to know about whatever issue, but the other is I want to make a change.
So I think this all comes down to the role and the function of a think tank. Now, there is a sort of natural dichotomy between researchers who come from an academic background and who are in the academy, and researchers who are operational and policy-oriented in think tanks, as we know them. I think no one questions the value of research and the importance of evidence base, but sometimes you need to be more demand-driven than supply-driven, and often the skills that it takes to understand your policy environment and what could be policy relevant and what could then lead to promising research streams are skills that certain researchers don't have. I think the mistake is to see, the research and policy process as a linear process, which begins with, the generation and analysis of evidence, and then later relates to the packaging and dissemination of that evidence, and later to policy influence. I think all of this stuff happens at every stage of the process, and whether you're an academic researcher that comes from the academy or a more kind of dexterous, policy entrepreneur, you still need to understand the entire process and have the skills to be able to engage. So I don't think it's a false dichotomy. I think everyone who is in research needs to understand research, but research on its own, doesn't get you anywhere if you're in the business of policy influence.
Researcher and academic researcher. A researcher is a researcher. If you start putting things in pigeonholes, you will get lots and lots of mistakes. I have seen research conducted in Ghana wrongly, and they were said to be policy, and they will not influence policy because they were done wrongly. There are situations where you need to stratify across variables, and there was no stratification. They just went and took samples, and they were wrong. And the government started pursuing those kind of... I can talk about so many situations. So let us not divide research into policy research or academic research. In fact, you have a topic to work on, and you need to understand the topic. If the researcher knows his topic, you don't have to be a policy researcher or an academic researcher.
Sorry, Gina. I think I need to contribute. I was thinking, we are talking about academic research. Do we have a common understanding of what it is an academic research? What is an academic research and which research is not academic? So sometimes I get a feeling that academic research is the research that is carried out at the higher learning institutions. But it could also be basic research, basic and applied research. So it's an issue of whether basic research is important for policy, and I'm saying yes, it is very important because, one example of basic research actually is generating new knowledge, like challenging the existing theories. People think that theories and policies, maybe they are two different things, but theory and policies are two sides of the same coin, because policies that are based on flawed theories will ultimately be wrong. So you have got to challenge existing theories first to really be able to carry out a research that is, at the end of the day, will be able to influence policy. Thank you.
Have you closed or can? Yeah?
we then move on to the question how to attract quality researchers. I think that there's somebody who is going to be doing that. So I'll leave that. But I think there's some agreement that we all require the same set of skills, and that think tanks require people who have, the qualifications, but the skill sets that we've put out there. And I think that there's no understanding, or is there agreement that there's not a difference between a policy researcher and an academic researcher?
I think we may be getting stuck in this, but there is a key difference between writing for academic purposes and writing for policy. And perhaps we could just agree on this and just leave this whole difference apart. I'm sure you'd agree because when you write for academic research and you write for policy, it's totally different. And just my input.
Yeah, I also agree there's a difference because it depends on the question you ask and how you ask it. But as much as there's a difference, even a policy researcher needs to do sound rigorous research. That's the first foundation. A policy researcher must even be able, and a policy researcher can actually use research which they have not necessarily done and simplify it in a way that you can communicate to the policymakers. But to be able to judge whether research is good or not, you must have the skills of the people who are writing for academic purposes. So I think the difference is how you ask the question and how you package it. But even a policy researcher requires the academic skills, high level.
And I think that we then introduce the second area, how do we attract our quality researchers? And I believe that everybody here is a quality researcher. So I hand over to Antonia. Thank you.